Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. The Atheist Experience is live, October 19th, 2003. That's right, we're live today. Sorry about the last couple weekends. We're just going to move on ahead. I'm your host, Martin Wagner. As always, Ashley Perrien, my co-host. And we're very pleased to have on the air today, joining us from out of town, visiting us this weekend, DJ Grothe of the Center for Inquiry. He is the Director of Campus and Community Programs at the Center for Inquiry, and he's come down to visit with us here in the ACA. That's right. And it's a really great pleasure to have you.
Well, thanks for having me.
And a pretty weekend for it, too. The weather was
beautiful.
Worked out for us. So, this show is sponsored by Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. at Hot Jumbo Bagels, with the exception of the first Sunday of each month when we have our lecture series in the Mayor's Room of the Austin History Center located at 9th and Guadalupe. Our speaker for November will be James D., a retired UT Classics professor, and he will be speaking on the subject of how various scientific discoveries are invalidating beliefs in the afterlife and what have you. So visit our website at atheist-community.org at the calendar page, and you'll be able to see some information about upcoming speaker events. Other things that the ACA gets involved in, just among our weekly activities, lots of fun. Godless Gamers is, of course, Monday night at 7 o'clock p.m. at the home of Russell and Virginia Glasser. And ACA Happy Hour is a Thursday evening get-together that we have at Antonio's Tex-Mex, which is on near the intersection of Highway 183 and Interstate 35 on the southbound feeder road. That starts, like I said, about 7:30 or so, but people tend to trickle in all evening long. So look for the table that has big Darwin fish on it and a bunch of loud people, and you'll find us. Other media stuff that we do, The Nonprofits, is our bi-weekly internet radio show, which plays at the atheistnetwork.com website every other Saturday from 2 o'clock to 3:30. The next episode of this will be October 25th, so that's this coming Saturday. Jeff D. is the host. Jeff Jones, I believe, is part of that. Russell Glasser. And it's just 90 minutes of news analysis and talking back and forth. And there is a live chat room that runs concurrently with the program. So if you're in the chat room, you can interact with the show and the hosts, and sometimes they'll talk back and forth that way. And last but not least, of course, our pals at the University Atheists and Agnostics. UAA is meeting now for the fall semester. First really good, successful student organization at the University of Texas for Atheists and Agnostics. So if you are a UT student or faculty member, visit studentorgs.utexas.edu/UAA for information about them. And their meetings are Fridays at 4 p.m. In room Garrison 200. So check that out.
We'll be meeting with them tomorrow. That's exciting. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So I believe that does it for the opening announcements. So otherwise, for more information about ACA, you can, of course, visit atheist-community.org and check us out right there. All kind of information about the activities we have been involved in, past and present. And if you are an unbeliever, how you can get involved. Yes, I am a little hoarse, in case you've detected it. I'm getting over a bout of laryngitis, which is the most annoying thing that has happened to me in recent memory, but seem to be on the mend. Anyway, before we get into visit Ashley for the news, I just again wanted to welcome DJ to Austin to the program. And very quickly, you are with an organization called Center for Inquiry, right? And
right.
Just what is this organization, very quickly? Like how long have you been around? What is your focus? And what do you do for them?
Right. Well, we could elaborate on this in a moment, maybe after the news, but the Center for Inquiry is an international nonprofit educational organization that's committed to promoting reason, science, and freedom of inquiry into every field of human endeavor, especially society's sacred cows. Mm-hmm. So we advance what's called scientific naturalism, the scientific outlook, and especially its implications for belief in the supernatural or the paranormal. And specifically for that organization, I've been around there for a few years, right after grad school, and I serve as Director of Campus and Community Programs. There are a number of organizations headquartered there, public education organizations. I serve as National Field Director for the Council for Secular Humanism. I also direct our campus outreach program called the Campus Free Thought Alliance. So we're really engaged in advocating for the scientific outlook in society, scientific naturalism.
Oh, good. Well, that's terrific. Well, we're going to talk to DJ in a lot of detail about CFI, more detail. And But we're going to go ahead and we're going to get to the news. But first, a little bit of old business to take care of. Again, this is more or less officially the start of the new season of the show, so welcome. We've been here on the air 6.5 years, and if you've never tuned on, if you've never watched the show before, it has evolved, interestingly enough. But if this is your first time if you're channel surfing and you're discovering us for the first time today, this is a live call-in show. About halfway through the program, we'll go ahead and we will talk to callers at home if you have questions pertaining to the subject or just about atheism or what have you. However, I want to mention, though, that we do on our website have a fact page, frequently asked questions, that we have assembled over the years of just the most common questions that we have been getting from callers. It's just the most basic stuff. What's an atheist? What do you believe in God? If not, what do you believe in? Difference between atheist and agnostic, etc. That would be on our website at our fact page. So if you have questions for us, it's quite possible if you're a first-time viewer, we've already answered you. So check that out. Also, I mentioned this was a live call-in show, but we never usually end up getting around to all the callers. We tend to get backed up, and by the end of the show, we usually have a few people hanging. So sorry about that. It happens, but do try to call in and make your voice heard. But if you miss us, we do have viewer feedback email as well. tv@atheist-community.org is our viewer feedback address. You can send us in mail and chew us out. And if we get a good letter, somebody will bring it on the air and read it and talk about it, and we answer them all. And some of them we put up on the website. But tv@atheist-community.org, that is your viewer feedback address to write us. And got a letter from a show a couple of weeks ago. One of our regular viewers. I knew this was going to happen. Somebody sort of wagged his finger at me because I stated that I was not technically opposed to capital punishment in all its forms, and he had wrote me this big letter saying, well, allow all the evils that can have, and of course he's completely right. I mean, this is a tool that has been used by oppressive governments to stifle dissent and people with inconvenient political views, that challenge the mainstream of thought, and that is deeply very wrong. Of course, the story that we were talking about at the time was of the guy who wrapped a child. What was he, a minister? In one of these,
wrapped him in duct tape
in Minneapolis.
One of these, I don't remember the city. It's one of these like strip mall tiny churches where they do the talking in tongues and stuff. And this kid, I forget for what reason, but he was wrapped head to toe in duct tape and suffocated to death. And I made some offhanded comment that guy had what was coming to him, and I still think he does. But I had a very nice lengthy email exchange with this viewer, and it said that, look, if I knew for a fact that life without parole was mandatory for killers, then I'm all for getting rid of the death penalty as being expensive and a big mess. But right now, though, in our system, it's really screwed up, and there are people who can kill their own children and they're out of jail in 4 years, whereas a guy can do 20 years for having a joint. And I think that there's definitely a lot to be worked on there. But thanks a lot for all your email and feedback, and we take it very seriously indeed. So that's it. We're going to go to Ashley for the news, and then we'll talk to DJ.
Okay.
What's happening in the world?
A couple quick stories. First off, if you've been watching the show at all for a while now, you occasionally will touch on the Boy Scouts and another group that kind of formed as a splinter group, the Scouting for All. Scouting for All is going to be having a protest rally at San Diego's Balboa Park, right across the street from the Scouts' headquarters. The protest being organized by local community leaders and former Boy Scouts who oppose the BSA's policy requiring Boy Scouts to affirm faith in God and prohibiting homosexuals from serving as Scout leaders. Daryl Lambert is actually giving the keynote on that one. Now,
met with him in Phoenix.
Now, the interesting thing about this story, though, is the Boy Scouts and their reaction to this. They are calling this a hate rally.
Of course.
By the radical homosexual activists and atheist group. Greg Shields, the national spokesman for the SA, the group and their supporters are protesting in front of an empty building. They're holding this protest on a Sunday. And they're replying saying, you're going to be in front of an empty building because on a Sunday afternoon, all of us are going to be either at home or at church.
Protests is pretty much symbolic anyway. But something? What's funny about this is there is an understood behavioral phenomenon, right? Where, like, the schoolyard bully who's always beating up on the little kids and taking their lunch money and what have you, and then when somebody finally has the guts to stand up to him, or if he gets called to the principal's office or whatever, what is his standard whine, right? It's, everyone's picking on me. I'm the victim. No one will leave me alone. And so I have to do this. And so this is just the same sort of projection, right?
Yeah.
It's like, apparently if you tell the Boy Scouts of America, hey, it's not fair to discriminate against us, please don't.
They feel discriminated against.
Yeah. We're expressing hate to them. Apparently, and Coulter, who is the radical right-wing, bimbet of the month, apparently spoke to the BSA, was one of their keynote speakers, and they've had a lot of other religious right speakers at various functions that they've held. So, it's known that they are, not exactly neutral on this. Look, if the Boy Scouts of America wants to be a private, faith-based organization, fine. Yeah. Don't take public money. Right. Change your name to the Religious Boy Scouts of America, so there's no confusion, and get about your business.
Well said.
Yeah.
And it's just the arrogance in this article. They build this as a national rally, and they only have 3 or 4 sites. Just kind of, mocking them and laughing at them. Shield says Boy Scouts have dealt with such individuals before, and so he is not overly concerned about these rallies.
Yeah, well, Martin Luther King only had a few guys to start with.
Exactly, yeah.
So, it's... amazing.
Yeah. Despite the rallies and any other protest effort, Shield said his organization will not waver in its policy of excluding homosexuals from holding positions as scout leaders or its stance as an institution based on the principles of honor, character, and faith in God.
Yeah, which, of course, we all know gay people can't have those things.
Of course. Of course. Atheists can't be.
And atheists can't have honor and character.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't happen, so.
Yeah. I did a big rant when the whole Darrell Lambert thing started up, saying that, I'd like to up Darrell's merit badges to 40, and I'd like to give him a few more. I'd like to give him one for integrity and courage and critical thinking.
Courage,
and critical thinking, which are 3 attributes that I guess the Boy Scouts don't care to give merit badges in. But, it's just... really amazing. Here's a young man who is exhibiting all of the character traits that I think
make a good citizen.
Exactly,
and a good scout, and what the scouts ostensibly promote. But since Darrell doesn't have an invisible friend, evidently that matters more. So,
right.
Okay, what else?
His 30-some odd merit badges that he got didn't count for anything.
Yeah. 10 years in the Scouts, 37 merit badges apparently counts for nothing if you don't have an invisible friend.
Exactly.
So, all right, what else?
Okay, we are in a holy war.
Oh, we are?
Yes, according to...
Who said that? Osama bin Laden?
Oh, we only wish. Evangelical Christian Lieutenant General William G. Boykin said that... what is it? This is a... let me find the actual quotes here. He was addressing a church while in uniform. He told audiences that terrorists hated America because it was a nation of Christian believers, and that the enemy the enemy in the war on terrorism was Satan.
This is amazing.
Also, he was quoted as saying a Muslim warlord in Somalia had an idol for a god, because obviously they're not the real gods; they're the fake little ones.
But did you see the thing in the news today? Did you see how he was trying to spin that when he's apologized, right? I guess under pressure from the administration.
Oh, I didn't see
Did you hear how he tried to spin it? Yeah. He's like, oh, well, I wasn't talking about Allah when I meant the idol for a god. To me, his gods were, money and power. And I'm like,
oh, come on.
BS. I mean, totally. the word for that is, let me see, we could call that a lie, right? Because you were being untruthful because what you really meant was Allah. And you know it, and it's so. And of course, again, he's only apologizing because he was embarrassed in the media. And I actually love this, right? I mean, this is when anytime Pat Robertson shoots off his mouth or something.
Oh yeah, bombing, nuking,
nuke
the State Department.
Exactly,
Something. I just have to say, I love those guys so much, right? Because
they're their worst enemies.
Yeah.
They're their own worst enemies.
And our best friend, because it's like, this is what we've been saying all along about these guys, people. There's really something else. And so I love this. And the fact that the reaction has been so overwhelmingly negative to these remarks, despite the fact that we fear the climate in America today is becoming so fundamentalist friendly that it's a little terrifying to think that, we're a hop and a skip away from that sort of thing being accepted. And it was accepted by all the people in that congregation that he was talking to. Which
I bet he thinks the mistake was just that his remarks were recorded and recorded, not that he said them.
That he said them.
He's sorry that he was caught, not sorry that he said it.
Kind of like Nixon. Or kind of like Ken Lay, kind of like Enron. You know, it's like, oh, we were caught. Or Jimmy Swaggart. Oh, I just got caught. No, I sinned. I've sinned against you.
And I like his full quote about the idol. His actual quote was, "Well, you know what I knew, that my God was bigger than his. I knew that my God was a real God and his was an idol."
Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that 5th grade,
My God's bigger than your God. My dad has more muscles.
My dad's bigger than your dad.
Yeah, my dad can beat up your dad.
Exactly.
But of course, what is hilarious, though, is that, with his subsequent attempt to spin that into, I was referring to money and power. Well, if your God is bigger than his God, why does your God seem to need his God so much? Because you guys are constantly asking for freaking money from everybody. And you're after power in America. So it's wonderful.
And of course, a lot of people, Donald Rumsfeld did absolutely nothing about any of this because he's saying that was a private affair. Mm-hmm. It was not an official statement of the military or anything like that.
Even though he's in uniform.
So, exactly. And so what he says in his own time is, we can't do anything about that. That's what makes this nation great.
Well, in a sense, right. I mean, yes, in America, one of our great freedoms is that you can be a religious loon if you want. But there's certainly legitimate cause for concern if the religious loon in question happens to be a 3-star general leading our big fight against war on terrorism in Iraq and what have you. Because this is the kind of inflammatory rhetoric that Bush was actually trying to avoid back in his State of the Union address and back after 9/11, saying, "Oh no, this isn't a war against the Islam faith. This isn't a war. This isn't a religious holy war. This is about our our American values versus the terrorists and blah blah blah." And and now he is, and now out comes this general saying it's Satan against God, and we have to defeat Satan, and it's like, oh no,
Who's the radical fundamentalist now?
Okay, we got one more?
We have one more.
Okay.
The Supreme Court added the Pledge of Allegiance to the docket for its new term on Tuesday.
Michael Newdow's case.
Yep, agreeing to consider whether public schools violate the Constitution by requiring teachers to lead their classes in pledging allegiance to the flag of one nation under God. They point out in this article, to be specific, though, they are not having a hearing on the pledge itself.
Right.
It's simply teachers requiring students and leading the pledge.
But that distinction is going to be glossed over by the Christian right.
Of course. They're going to say that we're trying to ban God
ban the pledge, trying to ban God.
The pledge, yeah.
And what was it? Hal Lindsey recently.
Late great planet Earth.
Yeah. He recently said he wrote some op-ed at some point where he basically said that what they're trying to do is make it to make reciting the pledge a federal crime,
right?
Which is hooey, right? But again, that's the same. That's a sort of emotionally laden rhetoric.
Straw manning. Didn't Scalia, or was it Rehnquist? I think Scalia recused himself.
Yeah.
Exactly. Actually, under Michael Newdow actually requested that he stand down from
his
this.
Lawyers called for it
because Scalia had made comments earlier on saying, what was it? I don't have it.
Well, just showing that he already had a formed opinion.
Exactly. He had already had an opinion on the case. He's not going to be able to be a completely neutral person in the case.
Can't show the impartiality.
He should be stepping down from a case like this, and he did.
Right.
Well,
so now it's an even number, and
interesting.
So the Ninth Circuit's ruling will be upheld if it's an exact tie.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Okay.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this pans out. Very much so. And of course, I expect a massive hue and cry.
Oh yeah.
From the religious right if they uphold the decision.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. So all right. Well, thank you then.
Yep. That's it for the news.
All right. Again, want to welcome DJ to the show. So we had mentioned earlier the Center for Inquiry again. So you can. Give us an overview of the organization, what you do for them, and just start from there.
Okay, the Center for Inquiry, as both of you know, and the viewers I'm sure might not know, being here in Austin, the Center for Inquiry is a network of critical hubs for rationality in our society. So in North America, there are 4 branches. We have offices in Rockefeller Center, in Florida, in Hollywood, California, and in upstate New York, adjacent to the State University of New York. And the Center for Inquiry is best conceived of as kind of a headquarters of a number of different programs and organizations of public education and advocacy, all committed to defending and promoting reason and science in society. Okay. Specifically, each one of those organizations headquartered at the Center for Inquiry have their own missions too. So at Center for Inquiry is headquartered the Council for Secular Humanism, publishes the magazine Free Inquiry. Right. Free Inquiry is the leading magazine for the secular ethical point of view in our society, the non-religious, the atheistic ethical point of view. Yeah. And so this is Free Inquiry.
Yeah, and this most recent one.
Yeah.
And that's commonly available, too, which is good.
Yeah, now you'll notice the cover story is a little controversial. It's the Great Scandal, Christianity's Role in Nazism. This is an underreported story, and it's the kind of message that Free Inquiry and the Council for Secular Humanism treat, which is really advancing the non-religious point of view in our society, because there are so many voices. There's a cacophony of religious extremists and liberal religionists and supernatural and paranormal voices. Free Inquiry tries to offer a rejoinder to that by offering a reasonable response to those purveyors of, I'd call it uncharitably nonsense. Another organization headquartered at the Center for Inquiry is SciCop. It's the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, which is a worldwide organization devoted to applying science and reason to claims of the supernatural and paranormal. So the paranormal is any claim that says that something's happening that science can't prove. So psychics and cryptozoology like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and UFOs and past life regression, any of the supernatural claims that don't specifically have to do with religion. So Council for Secular Humanism treats religion in our society and secular ethics and the role of reason applied to ethics. SciCop publishes Skeptical Inquirer magazine, and this treats the paranormal. Some of the leading minds of the day have been involved in these two organizations headquartered at the Center for Inquiry, such as Carl Sagan, Richard Dawkins, Stephen Jay Gould, Wendy Kaminer, on and on. A lot of people who are interested in advancing the scientific naturalist point of view.
Right.
By scientific naturalism, I mean the outlook that is a result from having a commitment to the methods and the implications of science. Other organizations headquartered at the Center for Inquiry are the Campus Free Thought Alliance. We run a secular Islam outreach program called the Institute for the Secularization of Islamic Societies. It's kind of a contradiction there for you to think of secular Muslims, but the analogy would be secular Jews, non-religious Jewish people or non-religious Catholics. You know, they're culturally Catholic,
brought up in that culture,
but they're now non-believers, and they're working for church-state or let's say mosque-state separation in those societies. It's interesting that Bush is all for the separation of mosque and state when it comes to Islamic societies, but not so when it comes to American society.
Exactly. So what was the impetus behind, I guess, not just the growth and the development of CFI and its various affiliate organizations, and what sort of fights are you engaged in at this time? Like I know that you mentioned something about movements on campus,
right?
And but just through the mass media and through just like dialogue through other channels to get the message out. What various things are you focused on as an organization at this time, specifically?
If you look at mass media and popular culture, there are a lot of purveyors of irrationalism. There are a lot of people hawking irrational belief systems, whether it's extremist religious points of view that call for jihads or holy wars or crusades, or it's New Age movements that say you don't need medical doctors to intervene when there are health problems, but you instead align chakras, or you charge up crystals, or you wear certain trinkets around your wrist and that heals you.
Or you just pray.
Or pray,
Just keep praying unless you happen to die while you're praying. But
all of these purveyors of nonsense in our society are really the the focus of the different organizations at the Center for Inquiry. But more than that, we're offering and we advance alternatives. So we're not just working to rip the rugs out from under people, but to let them know that, let's carry the metaphor, that the rug they're standing on is not too substantial, but that there's something a little more substantial for them to concentrate on, and that's the scientific outlook, scientific naturalism.
Yeah, that's an excellent point that I want to reiterate too, because quite often, and yours is not a strictly atheist organization, but atheist organizations quite often take a lot of criticism for the fact that it seems to be all, oh, well, you guys are just complaining, and you're out to attack.
Just a bunch of curmudgeons who have been burned by religion or something.
And not offering positive alternatives. And of course, like ACA as an organization, through promoting what we call positive atheism, we do try to do that sort of thing. Like we had... like a lot of the rallies that we have are actually motivated by positive messages as opposed to, attacks, unless, of course, there's something to protest.
So you're advancing a certain ethical ideal. You're not just carping against some supernatural or paranormal belief system.
Yeah, not just saying, oh, we don't want this. It's like, oh, here's something that we think works better. And for example, like one of our rallies was a celebration of church-state separation about in January 2002. We did something for the anniversary of Thomas Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptists, where he coined the term wall of separation. And we have also, we had our own memorial for the 9/11 victims, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that is something very important for organizations to focus on. Tell me, what are some of the memes, or what are some of the preconceived notions and some of the rhetoric that these purveyors of irrationalism, whether it's the Christian right or what have you, what exactly is their push? Exactly how are they mounting their attacks, and what sort of rhetoric are they presenting to their followers to get them to where we see this attitude like we have right now in our culture of ultra-religious conservatism. We have a general who can actually get in front of a group of people and say Satan's our enemy and be taken seriously.
And get away with that, and be believed.
And the Boy Scouts of America, you see these kinds of that. So exactly how is the religious right defending its position to its followers to get them all rallied up?
Well, I'll talk a little about the religious right, and in fact, there are so many purveyors of nonsense in our society that to list them all would be 10 shows. Right. So let's concentrate on just two areas that we focus on. One is what some people would call postmodernism. So in higher education today, there are educators, philosophers, professors in the humanities who will defend the position that any worldview and any idea is just as good as any other idea. Right. And in that way, they've become weirdly allied with religious political extremists like those evangelicals on the far right who are advancing that only their one view is the right view. So on the campuses, you have postmodernists who defend the teaching of creationism or intelligent design because their belief is that science and that the theory of evolution is just one mythic narrative among many others. Yeah. So that's postmodernism, and that's where we give a lot of attention to kind of defending the Enlightenment ideals of reason and science and the capacity of people to be rational and to discover and to find out small case T truth about matters. Yeah. Now another purveyor of nonsense, you're asking the rhetoric that they use. Let's talk a little about evangelical Christianity, or more generally, religious political extremists.
Right.
In America,
and we always have to take great care to make sure that we are not just stereotyping everyone into one little cube.
I'm glad you said that, because it's
that's another thing we can get accused of.
We share an ideal of a robust freedom of conscience. We believe that as Americans, we have a right to believe whatever we want to believe. If I want to believe in two gods or one God or no God, I have that right. The problem comes in when a person's private religious belief becomes politicized and advanced in the public arena to limit another person's civil liberties. So one of these movements,
one belief system is favored over others,
right? And advanced institutionally or by the government. Yeah, that's a problem.
Right.
So one of these groups on campuses and in society at large right now, we call the Mind Siege movement. There's an author named Tim LaHaye. I'm sure Many of you might have heard of Tim LaHaye. He's the author of the single best-selling series in publishing history. It's called the Left Behind book series, about what happens at the end of the world when Jesus comes back, the apocalypse, skin melts off faces, people are driving in their cars and they vanish. And so it's that storyline.
Sounds so appealing.
More books have sold in that series than any other series in publishing history, more than Harry Potter, more than anything else. Well, this fella, Tim LaHaye, who has a long history in the far-right movement, I wouldn't exactly say the conservative intellectual movement, but the culturally conservative movement. This Tim LaHaye co-authored a book with a evangelical intellectual named David Noble a couple of years ago. It was a New York Times best-selling book called Mind Siege, subtitled The Battle for Truth in the New Millennium.
So it's interesting that their use of language.
Right.
They're masters of that sort of rhetoric.
On the far right, for instance, there's no estate tax. It's called the death tax. It's called the marriage penalty. It's not called, tax benefits for being single. So, you're right. That it's very skillful use of language. Would make Goebbels proud. Maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Well, they say it about our side. So,
right. Yeah. So they co-authored this book, Mind Siege, Battle for Truth in the New Millennium. And this book makes the claim that the universities especially, society at large, but the universities, are dominated by something we call secular humanism. By secular humanism, they're attacking the publisher of this magazine, Free Inquiry, the Council for Secular Humanism.
Right.
So they argue that secular humanism is the single greatest threat to the survival of the American way of life. And moreover, they have a very sophisticated kind of nuanced argument. They say not only is it a threat, but that it's a religion, and therefore it's unconstitutional to teach evolution, sex ed, the other doctrines of the religion of secular humanism. I mean, specious argument doesn't hold water, but it's getting some action out
propaganda,
there.
Right?
I can't even comprehend how they actually consider some of that stuff. I mean, if you could actually go out and rap on a tree or something, then it's physically there. You can't teach that, trees don't really exist. Right. We're not going to teach about them. So much of the stuff in the sciences, at least, I can understand how they say, we're not going to teach, certain things. Right. That's fine. But when you start getting down to hard sciences, how can you say that, we can't teach biology?
Well, this I think is where this whole idea of postmodernism comes in, and this is where they co-opt the language of the postmodernists when it is to their advantage to do so. When it becomes this idea of, this idea is no better or just as good as any other, et cetera, et cetera. So you should teach ours because that's fair.
And the evangelicals assume that because we don't believe in a God or a supernatural or the paranormal, that we're necessarily postmodernist or culturally relativistic, that we don't believe in objective moral facts or objective truth claims about biology or physics or astrophysics.
So it's just incredibly skillful or propagandistic language that they're able to use. In other words, so it's not that... to their followers, it's not, the reason, evolution is taught in schools is not because it is, the best supported valid scientific theory about biology, but because
there's a cabal of humanists advancing a certain secret religion.
It's like this paranoid conspiracy theory where, the secret, society of, ring knockers is in charge, and they are.
That's the craziest thing, to my way of thinking, of Tim LaHaye's personal narrative. I mean, Tim LaHaye and others of his ilk have actually engaged in Illuminati conspiracy theories. Pat Roberts and others, I can't remember the specifics, but, thinkers on the far right have advanced notions that, that there's 12 Jews in Antarctica with a weather machine that are deciding natural disasters to benefit them economically.
Yeah, I think Art Bell had something about that.
So,
it's really
the
nuts.
Conspiracy theory that there's a small group of secular humanists in control of the country isn't very far removed from the old conspiracy theories of the Illuminati and things like that.
Right. Wow. Okay. Well, we're going to take a couple calls and then keep talking to DJ about the topics. So 477-2288 is the number to call and talk to us live. And thanks for holding. Ron, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. I wanted to ask, and first I'll start off by asking, are we ready for fact-based?
I knew it was going to be him.
Are we ready for what was it?
This is a weekly crank caller that we get.
That pretty much every public actually gets. He
Ty,
has nothing else to do with this.
Yeah, and he calls like 6 or 7 other. He just wants attention. Ty, you're on the air.
He needs some attention, all right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I haven't heard you mention yet about the World Series. I've noticed during the 7th inning stretch now, they're singing "God Bless America."
Well, I guess this is part of the cultural meme that's out there. That is, there is a large. If they could do it, they would replace the Star Spangled Banner with "God Bless America" as part of this. You have to wonder why it is that the Christian conservatives feel that they need to have the government constantly validating their belief system in order for it to be valid. They need this kind of...
As if the religion's not strong enough unless it has "In God We Trust" on the dollar bill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the Bush administration.
Yeah.
They're just taking control.
Yeah. So, anything else? Ty?
Well, I mean, how are we going to counteract it? I mean, we can take our own headphones and play a little bit of AC/DC's Hell's Bells, Diary of a Madman, or some of Jeff D's old rant and raves.
Yeah.
I love to hear those.
Yeah, you could do that. Well, I think that, like with DJ's organization, right, I think it's through education and through this open spirit of debate and dialogue that you get this kind of thing going on.
And we're persuaded that really the means by which we can most effectively influence society isn't through... this might open up a larger discussion, but it's not through creating an atheist civil rights movement where we have to picket churches and march and, get our rights, but instead it's a public education movement and dialoguing with those who would seek to limit our civil liberties because of their paranormal or supernatural beliefs.
Dealing with the facts.
Yeah, exactly. Public education, getting people talking about these important issues, because otherwise it's kind of ignored, and sooner or later you realize the government's evangelical Christian, or maybe that already happened with Ashcroft and
it really is. Okay, Ty. Anything else?
That's it.
Well, thanks a lot for calling, man. Take care.
Thank you.
One thing that I noticed was that no. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. One thing that I noticed was interesting was that today you spoke to our group. We had an unusual mid-month lecture,
right? And
you presented some video that Tim LaHaye and the Mind Siege, this whole sort of the movement, but specifically, I mean, how would you refer to it? It involves the same kind of rhetoric I've noticed that you usually use in a wartime scenario, which involves, for example, dehumanizing the enemy.
Right.
Well, what they do is they
liken us to Nazis.
Yeah, they build up secular humanism as this boogeyman, and I also noticed that they always, and I thought this was kind of particularly offensive, was that they refer to themselves. Whenever they talk to themselves, they use the term pro-moral.
Right.
And in fact, the implication being that if you aren't on their side, you must be...
Anti-morality, yeah. And this is, in fact, a brilliant strategy among those organizers. No longer are they only reaching out to other evangelical Christians, but to any pro-moral American who disagrees with, what Michael Newdow did, or looks around and sees, there's violence on the streets, there's a lot of sex and violence on TV. There has to be an explanation. The easiest explanation, the simplest, the fastest, is that there's a cabal of secular humanists orchestrating it all.
Yeah.
They do use the term pro-moral American as if we're anti-moral, but I'll tell you something. One of these, I had a radio debate with David Noble, one of the authors of this book.
Right.
And we had a special call-in where Paul Kurtz, the founder of all of these organizations, a retired professor of philosophy at State University of New York, he called in as a guest on the show when I'm debating with David Noble on secular humanism and church-state separation. And David Noble began, he was kind of a little flustered with niceties to Paul Kurtz. And he said, Paul, you know what? I was just reading through Humanist Manifesto 2, which Paul Kurtz authored in 1973. He said, I agree with almost everything you say. Morally, I agree with all of it. I just don't agree with a couple points. And Paul Kurtz wasn't baited by that. Paul Kurtz instead said, David, I'm alarmed that you impugn so many good, moral, non-religious Americans. Why would you do that? And there was a pause. There was dead air. And that's the point. He's impugning the goodness of many non-religious people by vilifying them, like you said.
Exactly.
He has to make
because they want to
make us unhuman, bad, or evil, deceived by Satan, as you saw in this video.
Because they want to redefine morals in such a way as to place their particular belief system and their particular political, politically motivated belief systems at the center of it.
Right. Well, you remember from this morning when I gave the talk to ACA, the book Mind Siege had 220,000 copies now have been distributed. A lot are distributed on the campuses. Another book, Clergy in the Classroom, a textbook on against secular humanism and secular ethics. What's most alarming is that they've prepared a 6-part video training series for evangelical Christians that they've sent out to thousands of churches across the country to, in their words, mobilize Christian foot soldiers to take back the country from the godless and immoral.
Wow. The paranoia here is amazing. Yeah. This is like these... when they say they're training Christian foot soldiers with these videos, it kind of makes me think of those Al-Qaeda videos.
Right.
Now, they're not quite getting into physical terrorism.
Obviously, they don't use the same strategy as those other religious political extremists, but they are all religious political extremists.
Yeah,
they're all seeking politically to advance a personal religious belief.
And a lot of it is sort of based on, I think, they perceive that they have a power base that is being threatened, and they want to shore that power base up. And then it also seems like ultimately it really is down to fundraising, right? I mean, they want to use as much emotional rhetoric as they can. And I was watching some of these video clips you showed this morning, and I was just picking out the fallacies, right, one after another, and it was very obvious to me. And it was amazing to me that it wouldn't be obvious, to others.
To the viewers.
The viewers, they just don't think that way. But I was noticing them all. They're just going down the list. Okay, there's a straw man. There's an argument. There's an argument by declaration. There is there's a slippery slope, et cetera, et cetera.
But you also notice the effective use of emotional appeals, and you can imagine being a well-meaning, God-fearing evangelical Christian in a church with your fellows, your family, people you love, and your minister says, congregation, we're going to be trained right now to fight against the enemy. You watch this video series, you can imagine how it'd light fire under your tuchus, make you get out there and fight the enemy.
I never realized that. Right. And it's just, again, it's that sort of effective use of the media. Wow, it's amazing. Well, in a minute, we'll talk about how CFI is now going to try to counter that. But we're going to take a few more callers here, and we're going to start with Jim, who's been holding a long time. Hey, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I've been listening to you guys talking about Pat Robertson and talking some negative things about him. Now, I've been a long-time watcher of Mr. Robertson and a long-time follower, and granted, I don't agree with some things that he speaks about, but what's not being taken into account is...
Lord.
That was pretty effectively deceptive. I have to hand it to you.
You see,
I was so hankering to talk a little about Pat Robertson.
Yeah.
Good one. A good one.
Whatever. Okay. Speaking of, this is the atheist experience right there. Those are the kinds of people that are out there. Anyway, but what about Michael?
Hello?
You're on the air.
Okay, just wanted to say I don't exactly agree with the atheist experience in general, but...
in what way?
I was raised a conservative Christian.
Okay.
And went to a conservative Christian school and graduated. But I will say this.
Me too, by the way, Michael.
Yeah. Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay. I will say this. I don't exactly agree. I think the problem with Christianity... Actually, I don't think there's a problem with Christianity. I believe that there is a problem with the church. I think the church pushes people away by the way it treats humanity as a whole. And I will say that I believe that any belief system really about Christianity is a result of the way the church depicts how God is and exactly.
But what you have to look at, though, in that situation is that now if the church is the authority that is there to preach the message of this religion, then what you probably have is a situation where the religion has essentially taken a back seat or has been more or less invalidated by what ultimately are the political motivations of what the church has become.
Oh, exactly.
And which pretty much means that, in my book, it really is all about these institutions looking to shore up power in a culture.
Exactly.
And
I think some of it is definitely that, and that's a peril when you institutionalize religious tradition, especially in ancient monotheism. But I really appreciate what you said, Michael, about you were kind of talking religion versus Christianity.
Exactly. Yeah.
One pause I have when I hear that kind of explanation, it sounds very similar to in the 70s, there was this movement among hippies, the Jesus freaks, the Christians that were kind of anti-establishment, but still ardently kind of converted. They had a charismatic they were slain by the Spirit or something. They had some religious experience. The problem with that is that the institutions that have grown out of the faith claims of Christianity are a direct result of the faith claims of Christianity.
Sure.
The belief that you have to go ye therefore into all the world and preach the gospel inevitably led to the missionary work that and all the horrors that had to do with indigenous peoples and the Jesuits and the evangelical missionaries now in third world countries and in China. So the institutions that have grown out, here's the point, the institutions that have grown out of Christianity's faith claims, the religious aspect, Christianity as a religion, are in fact, they're a direct result of it. It's hard to bifurcate that, in other words, I'm saying, Michael.
Yeah.
But they do that again all the time, right? I mean, there is, of course, you can always, when we talk about the extremely public religiosity that you see coming from like elected leaders in this country, or just people on the far Christian right who are trying to make, who want government policy decisions now to be religiously based and what have you, and they want monuments to their faith up in government buildings, and they need this sort of official validation, as it were. And and you always mention the passage from Matthew where Jesus says, the right way to do this is you go in your closet and you pray, and don't listen to the hypocrites standing on the street corner.
Of faith,
yeah. So it occurs to me that on this show quite often we've referred to the Bible as it's the big book of multiple choice because depending upon how politically motivated these Christian movements are, right? They pick out the scriptures that support what they want to do. They ignore the ones that don't. And it is ultimately all about just getting validation for what they want to do.
Yeah,
anyway.
you could read agrarian communism in the Bible. You could read a rugged capitalism, a kind of a businessman's pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, or give a Mother Teresa, give all your wealth and feed the poor. I mean, everything you want is in the hodgepodge called the Bible.
Yeah.
You're right.
But anyway, what I would suggest to you, caller, is that if you as a Christian are offended by what you see the church doing and offended by what you see politicians doing who sort of get out there and they wear their religion on their sleeve to get votes and what have you, you are the guy. You are the kind of Christian that those guys need to hear from. Because we'll criticize those guys a whole lot, but they won't listen to us, right? Because we're part of the evil atheist conspiracy. But, it is Christians like yourself who don't like the idea of Christianity being politicized and the church becoming this politicized movement that is trying for too much power. You are the Christians that those guys, that Ashcroft and Falwell and Robertson and these guys need to hear from. And, so that's why I want to challenge you to sort of, to become, more vocal about your disapproval of what you see going on in the church if you see that kind of see things going on that you don't like.
Okay, I just had one more question.
Sure.
I'm not sure quite who's the gentleman all the way to your left. Yes.
That's DJ Grothe.
DJ, hi, Michael. Yeah.
Now, having grown in a Christian school, you probably had, probably an hour class a day or something that had nothing to do but the Bible, right?
I went to a Christian college. I didn't go to a Christian
grade school.
Yeah, grade school or secondary school.
Okay. I just want to make this one quick point. I don't think basically the church. I don't know. I sound like a moron. I can't believe it. Okay. Religion, I believe, has been turned into something it wasn't. The church is not what it was intended to be, and I think that's the biggest problem. I think that
Chuck Colson makes this argument, and others, yeah.
Yeah, for instance, in 1945, they found some Dead Sea Scrolls
that they thought were to be written by the actual hand of God, like Jesus actually wrote these scrolls, and they weren't canonized into the Bible like the rest of the scriptures. Like I kind of have a problem with the fact that men decided what was the inspired word of God and what wasn't. If you see what I'm saying there.
Well, sure. I mean, our explanation for that is that these religions came from those men and they came from those cultures, and
they changed. They evolved so much over time.
Yeah.
A documenter historian can look at the text of the Bible and actually piece it together and see how the Bible developed.
And which historical periods gave rise to which books. Like
Harold Bloom's book, Book of J, it's called the Book of J, gives a very plausible explanation about how the Old Testament, the beginning of the Old Testament originated.
There's also Who Wrote the Bible,
Yes.
Richard Friedman.
Right.
And I've finished reading the Bible Unearthed, which takes an archaeological look at these periods in the history of Judea.
Michael, the Center for Inquiry, we talked about this earlier. One of the things we've recently done is do a video series on the historicity of the Bible, how it came to be about, how it developed, the different explanations, non-religious, non-supernatural explanations for how it developed. And this is one of the public education initiatives that we've made available. So if you're interested in exploring this more, you can go online, or you could go to the library. You could really just dig it up and
Search it out.
It's called Biblical Criticism. It's beginning with the high biblical criticism of the 19th century, which first called into doubt a lot of the fundamentalist claims people had about the Bible. And now we're spearheading a movement, Quranic criticism, because the Quran never had a reformation. The Islam never had a reformation like Christianity did.
Right.
There's a liberal wing in Christianity. There's not so much of that in Islam. And if you're interested in the origins of the Bible and how it's really a product of well-meaning men really, and just Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict is such a it's so full of holes, and it merits your critical attention to get in there and dig hard on what there's a lot of scholarship. There's a lot of scholarship out there, and there's a lot of scholarship that is accessible to regular people. It's not easy to where just guys like you and me can read it and understand it, and it's not just written in scholarly language for other professors. Right.
And it's a lot more interesting than I expected that it would be, because it all makes sense when you look at the history, the development of Judean culture,
right.
The two kingdoms, and how then it came together, and they were essentially just taking their oral histories and putting them down.
Right.
And one thing that the authors of the Bible Unearthed talked about was how you usually tend to see, once you get in the development of a civilization, first is you have a group of people who come together. And then once that has more or less coalesced into something, at that point, that culture of people, or maybe they've already been together. It's a tribe that's been around for a long time, or what have you. And they begin looking for a cultural identity, a specific cultural identity to set themselves apart from these guys and those guys and those guys.
Right.
And this
to
usually
sanctify themselves or set themselves apart.
And this usually tends to be the time in history that the myths and the oral histories of that culture are finally put on paper. Right. They're actually written down, and so a lot of scholars have traced the earliest books of the Old Testament to about like the 7th or the 8th centuries BC, and that is consistent with archaeological discoveries about when these ancient Judean kingdoms began to settle in and get about their business of, okay, we now need to be a people. Right. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, so. It's moreover.
Anyway, thanks a lot for your call, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.
It's so fascinating that it really merits our critical attention. The Bible is the most important book we could read, even as atheists, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
So, who is next online? Ryan is holding. Hey, thanks for holding. You're on the air.
Oh, thanks. I just wanted to ask, I know atheists don't believe in God. So what exactly do you believe as far as any higher power or anything? You just don't believe in anything above us?
Okay, well, you sound like you're feeding back a little. Well, we'll address that sort of in a row. I guess I can go, and then we'll go to DJ and Ashley. You're right. Atheism, we could talk about like scientific naturalism in the various terms through this. Atheism, true, it is a term that usually only refers to what you don't believe in.
Right.
If you're an atheist, if you don't believe in any gods, an atheist is just what you are. Now, But above and beyond that, an atheist can more or less subscribe to any different philosophy or political bent that you want. You have atheist conservatives, you have atheist liberals, you have atheist objectivists. And what I was noticing in the documentary that we were watching today that they were sort of mocking the use of these terms that secular humanists have adopted, like scientific naturalism. They're saying, "Oh, well, that's just a euphemism." They're trying
it's a code word. They call it.
Yeah, it's a code word. They're trying to use that instead of atheism. And what you point out was no. This is all about making distinctions because again, atheism is just refers to what you don't believe, whereas scientific naturalism, these are terms that express a thing that you do sort of subscribe to as a way of, okay, if we don't use religious ideas to explore the world, how do we?
Ones, right.
And so scientific naturalism then explains what you are in favor of as opposed to something, atheism, which just like, well, we don't believe in any gods.
Right.
But overall, I think the answer to your question is that, atheists can adopt a great many different personal, political, and philosophical views. So you have atheists who are pro who are favor abortion rights. You have atheists who are very strongly against abortion. You have atheists who are liberal on various issues and conservative on others, and then you'll get atheists who are completely flip-flopped. They'll be very conservative on the one issue and liberal on the ones that the other guys are conservative on.
Right.
So there's no real way
And in fact, I find myself increasingly more persuaded by classical liberal or economically conservative notions as opposed to welfare liberal notions, but that has really nothing to do with my atheism, my lack of belief.
What about you?
At all?
Basically, just dovetailing into that, like say the political spectrum doesn't come into it. Lack of belief in a God is what atheist is, and it stops there. Again, it runs the gamut. Typically, again, if you kind of look at the average, I think most atheists are going to tend to be liberal. Politically speaking, liberal and to a lesser extent libertarian. Conservatives are pretty uncommon. Totalitarians, not too many of them.
Yeah. But you know what's
although Soviet totalitarianism was itself atheistic, there ain't so many of those atheists over here. Right?
But of course, but communism was not an atheistic philosophy in itself. It was an economic.
Right.
It was an economic theory that
it was atheistic, but it wasn't. You're right. It was an economic push.
And the reason that the Soviet Union, stamped out religion was not again so much because of philosophical issues, but because of the power issue. It's like here is this incredibly powerful organization that will compete with our governmental institution that we want to put into place. So the way to do it is simply to suppress it. Yeah. Because of course religion has a very long, centuries old tradition in Russia, just like anywhere else, and the people who lived in Russia during the Soviet Union and believed in God didn't stop because the government told them they should.
Right.
But the practice of religion was seen as a threat to the power base, and so that's why it was suppressed. And that's wrong, right? Yeah. To suppress any inconvenient, belief system or political movement is not what is right. I mean, in secular humanists, we think that the free exchange of ideas is the most important thing that people can have.
Right. Free inquiry.
Yeah. And I think an important thing to point out, getting a bit more back on topic, I guess, to the question, what we believe versus don't believe. We don't believe that there are any gods. Now, what we do, I guess, believe in, again, there's a natural way to look at the world. Science explains a lot of the stuff in the world as it is. And so we have good ideas on how people came to being.
And the stuff it doesn't explain is
on how life started and how the world got here and how the universe started and so on. There's some of it we don't know. We're looking into it.
Yeah.
But we're looking into it.
But it's an ongoing spirit of inquiry.
Exactly.
Right. To follow up on just your initial question where you said, okay, you don't believe in God. Do you believe in any higher power or anything supernatural?
No.
There are atheists, I'm sure, who believe in maybe UFOs, but they don't believe in the God of the Bible.
Exactly.
Or atheists who believe in something supernatural. By and large, though, most atheists are not just atheists. They're what we would call scientific naturalists, people who don't believe in anything supernatural. They don't believe in psychics or faith healers or talking to the dead, like John Edward on TV. Or is it Edward?
The pet psychic.
Edward, I guess.
Oh, the pet psychic. That's a weird one.
So most atheists are what's called scientific naturalists or metaphysical materialists. They believe all that there is in the world, is matter. There's no supernatural, there's nothing beyond nature.
And I think you can argue for that position very, very successfully.
Right. Just by looking at the facts.
Right. Well, because let's just say that some sort of supernatural, let's say science were actually able to prove the existence of something heretofore thought supernatural, like ghosts, right? Well, the act of proving the supernatural thing would make it cease to be supernatural.
It would be a natural phenomenon that had before been unexplained.
That we finally discovered, like black holes or something, right? Or atoms, right? Which were theoretical up to a point and are hypothetical, and then we began to really dig them out. And so even if a deity existed, and we proved that deity existed, that deity would be a part of the natural world. Right. So proving the supernatural would cause it to be absorbed into the natural, which will ultimately means that there really is no supernatural.
And in fact, what you're talking about right now brings into light why it's so important for us to have an open mind. We're not closed-minded atheists. We're not people who say, I know that I know that I know there is no God. We say, instead, so far there has been a total lack of evidence for belief in a God.
Yeah.
The minute I get some amazing evidence that God exists, I would assent to that proposition. I think it's incredibly unlikely that would happen. Yeah. Same's true for psychic energy or any paranormal claim. Yeah. We don't go in investigating or inquiring into a subject area knowing the answer. You go in as an inquirer with an open mind, looking just following where the facts lead.
Yeah. So I hope that answered your question at some point.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one more thing.
All right.
I wanted to just add a little spice. How would you guys feel about agnostics? Do you think they're just lazy?
Actually, that's the funny question. That's a question on our fact page. The difference between agnosticism and atheism. Actually, I would define myself as both agnostic and atheist. Because agnosticism and agnosticism, right, are terms that refer to knowledge. Mm-hmm. It's like what can you know, what do you know, what are the limits to what you can know, et cetera, et cetera. So it's agnosticism, Gnosticism. Those are knowledge claims. Mm. Theism and atheism, on the other hand, have to do with what you believe or you don't believe. So I would be agnostic in that I admit I cannot prove one way or the other whether or not a God exists, and I don't know that such proof does or does not exist. But I would be an atheist in that because of what I consider to be a lack of compelling proof, I choose not to believe. Right. So I know a lot of people who are agnostic theists. They say I can't prove it, but I just feel that there's some sort of higher power out there. And they might not be Christian, they might not engage in any worship or what have you, but they're believers in a certain vague sense, and they're agnostic, but they're theistic. So. I think that when you start making Gnostic claims, then you really have your work cut out for you, because then the burden of proof,
hidden knowledge or something.
Yeah, the burden of proof is then very strongly upon you to support your position. So,
Ryan, I think that the designation agnostic is useful among some people who don't want to really come out as an atheist, but etymologically, everyone, I would argue, believer or non-believer, is literally an agnostic, because if you need faith, if you choose, Hebrews 11:1 in the Bible says faith is the substance of things not yet seen, not provable. So if you have faith in God, that means you don't have factual knowledge of God. That's why you have faith. And if you have faith, you're necessarily an agnostic, someone who doesn't know, therefore you have faith. Mm-hmm. The same is true for all atheists. Any atheist who says, I can prove that God doesn't exist, well, that's as specious an argument as a religious believer who says science somehow proves that God exists.
Yeah.
So that's just a follow-up on what you said.
Agnostic, or nature shows design and or whatever, right?
Yeah. The term agnostic is so broad that it's not very useful. Yeah. And properly defined, the term atheist means what most people mean by agnostic. It means someone who lacks belief in God, someone who doesn't find sufficient reason to believe in the knowledge claim about God.
Yeah. I've had a friend of mine I know a guy who likes to think that the term agnostic means you're sort of an atheist with a foot in the door. Which means that, it has to do with people. I think some people are kind of afraid of the whole idea of like committing to one position one way or the other on
That's
something.
How it's commonly used.
Yeah, and so they want to think that it is kind of this third option that leaves them an out either way. But when you get right down to it, it really doesn't do that, because, at the end of the day, right, you are living your life based upon sort of the presumption that a deity of some kind does exist and does care about your existence and is watching over you or doing whatever, or you are living your life as though that isn't the case. Right. And so you kind of do commit yourself, whether you know it or not. And so I think it's more helpful for people to understand those distinctions. You're right. I mean, I think everyone in the world if they were, if to look at the issue honestly, would have to say, yeah, I'm agnostic, but I believe, or I don't believe.
I choose to believe or I don't. Yeah, either you lack belief in God or you have belief in God. Either,
Yeah,
you're
so,
atheist or not.
okay.
If only a lot of Christians or anybody had as much knowledge as you guys would.
Oh, well, thanks.
Appealing to our intellectual vanity always works.
Yeah, exactly. Flattery will get you everywhere. But all right, but thanks a lot for watching and for calling, okay? And call back anytime.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling.
Take care. Well, we just inquire, right?
Right.
I don't claim to be smarter than anyone else, but I just think that the big questions need to be asked and studied.
Well said.
Okay. We're going to talk to John, and then if we get some more callers at some point, and then we can talk a little bit about what you are doing through. This is a booklet that your organization has through Campus Free Thought Alliance,
right.
And we can talk a little bit about how your organization is sort of doing outreach to students,
right.
Because of course college campuses ought to be, in a perfect world, they would be these wonderful venues for
free inquiry,
right. And debate into all sides of an issue, and you don't really, there is some of that,
right.
But. How to debate without it sort of descending into these ideological shouting matches
right,
and what have you. But anyway, John, you're on the air. Hello.
Right.
Hi.
I'm on, man.
Yeah, thanks for holding.
Right.
What's your question?
Well, I got something to read to you.
All right.
It says, Jesus answered them, "Is it not written in the law, I said ye are gods?"
Okay.
And then it states, "If he called them gods, unto whom the word of God came, and the scripture cannot be broken." See, it clearly states that we are gods.
Oh.
Sons of God or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and?
the point being...
That he's a polytheist, that he believes that we're all gods or something.
Yeah.
Maybe? No?
Yeah. Well, are you Mormon by any chance?
No.
Okay.
No.
Right. Well, okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, like I said, I don't really have a whole lot of feedback to that.
And you were asking if he was a Mormon because Mormon Christology says that, if I'm straight and I'm not, I'm gay. But let's say I was a straight Mormon and you were my wife and we got married someday in some future universe. You, as my wife, would be the Jesus character there. I would be the husband. I would be the Father God character.
Really?
It's called being sealed for time and eternity. And they have this great line: "What God was, man now is.
Yeah.
What God is, man will be."
which is
how appealing that is.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
such a
exactly.
cool religion.
When you basically get to be a god,
Be God, right.
with your own universe. It's crazy.
I may be able to give up the 72 virgins
Right.
if I can be my own
God and rule your own universe.
Your own god with your own. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's right.
You were talking about CFA.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about CFA and sort of, and this again is one of the many organizations under the umbrella of the Center for Inquiry.
That's a right way to frame it, yeah.
Okay.
Ostensibly the goals of the university,
Okay.
free unfettered inquiry into all fields,
Okay.
is the goal of the Center for Inquiry and our campus outreach program. Now it's called the Campus Free Thought Alliance.
Right.
In the spring, look online or other places, you guys can, for Center for Inquiry on campus. We're going to be rebranding it CFI on campus. And Center for Inquiry, its campus outreach program, will be promoting the goals of the university: free, unfettered inquiry into all fields of human endeavor. And especially, to our way of thinking, we'll focus on the sacred cows,
Right.
the reigning mythologies, paranormal beliefs, supernatural beliefs, the postmodernisms.
Yeah. Now, the Christian right has been inordinately successful and effective in doing a ministry towards not college campuses as well as grade schools, going all the way down, high school, junior highs, and I remember all the way from even fifth grade to elementary school. I actually lived overseas until I was like 10 or 12, but I got to do my last year of elementary school in America, and it's the first time I encountered this sort of thing. But I remember groups going
Youth
out to
for Christ, or
Young Life was a big one, there was a Fellowship for Christian Athletes,
right,
which is a very doctrinaire and very powerful campus organization. And then, of course, there is Campus Crusade for Christ.
InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, then
Right.
Hillel for conservative Jews, Cardinal Newman Centers for Catholics.
And perhaps maybe you could talk a little bit about what you have seen lately as the successes of these organizations, how they've achieved these successes, how well funded they are, and maybe how a CFI and CFA want to sort of provide this alternative.
Well, there's a lot to talk about there, but it's an underreported story. How effective is evangelical Christian campus outreach? Campus Crusade for Christ alone has an annual operating budget approaching $400 million each year for Christian campus outreach.
Man.
Every campus has a CCC chapter, a Campus Crusade chapter. And in fact, we work closely with them on a number of campus-wide debates on God's existence, or can you be good without believing in God, or those kinds of questions. Was Jesus the Son of God, or was he a man? Those kinds of questions. That's not the only subject we deal with. We also talk about and engage in public education campaigns regarding the paranormal, fringe science, and fringe medicine.
Right.
There are a lot of movements out there on the campuses. There was a study out a year and a half ago by, I believe, one of the Pew charitable trusts, one of the Pew organizations, that said you can go through all 4 years of college and never once have a meaningful debate or dialogue with someone who believes unlike you.
So that's crazy to me. That's just.
So if you're an evangelical Christian, you hang out with your evangelical Christians.
Yeah. And I've noticed that does kind of go past the campus experience for them too, because if you look at, a Christian culture has now sort of become this alternative to the mainstream, where there are Christian coffee houses and Christian bookstores and Christian video stores.
There's a whole Christian product line of everything Christian.
And they have the phone book that's Christian. The Christian phone book.
There's a Christian Yellow Pages.
Businesses that are just Christian.
Yeah, and it seems like this activity helps to insulate, the conservative Christians from any sort of competing point of view.
Right.
And
so they don't have to think about the tough questions.
Yeah. And it is much easier then when you have people who are already sort of living with those memes and in that kind of, in this isolated environment that they've selected for themselves. It's very easy, instead of, being able to present them with an alternative view and then engage them in a debate. They just look to their leaders, guys like Tim LaHaye, and who made this video, who are just going to demonize anyone who's sort of outside the realm, as it were, saying, "Oh, well, these people, they're immoral, and and they just want pure anarchy, and they're out to control the world and do all this kind of crazy Illuminati stuff." And people who aren't getting any other information are going to be. It's very easy to make them receptive to that kind of nonsense.
There's something about the evangelical community that. I'm not a sociologist, but it just seems like there's something about the evangelical community that creates followership, creates a need to be told what to do. You have people like Ralph Reed who know that he has power and he can command his Christian foot soldiers to do audacious things. One thing that they're very effective at on the campuses is, there's an organization called Summit Ministries out of Colorado Springs has a summer, let's say a training series for Christian college activists, Christian college students who are Christian activists, training them how to teaching them how to shut down biology classrooms, even tenured professors. I've spoken with tenured biology professors.
Shout them down?
No, well, it's a more devious strategy, because even tenured professors, the last thing they want to do is get a dean on their back or be seen to be advancing an anti-Christian point of view. So even some tenured professors have to pussyfoot around the teaching of evolution, even at major schools, because there's a strategy that students are trained to adopt at Summit Ministries and other places on how to advance their Christian biblical worldview in the schools. We are providing some alternatives, some means by which we are trying to offer a reasoned response. One thing that we're engaged in is each year, we put on each semester 25 to 30 major campus events across the country. So we have debates on secular ethics, on the role of religion in American public life, church-state separation, the paranormal, philosophy and religion, all kinds of issues that you would imagine would be important to us. And we draw crowds of students who, for the first time maybe, are engaging in a line of thought regarding these important issues. Most of the time, they get just the pablum at church that's one message, and it's on message, and it's about the enemy that they have to fight.
You think there's
so we're offering an alternative.
I want to offer a couple of comments on what you mentioned about followership and this neediness of that. First off, I think that is probably something that is just very easily exploited because it's already there in the sense of what
maybe
religion
it's there biologically in our species.
Well, I think that what makes religion attractive is that it does provide you have this celestial parent,
right?
You have it's the father figure who is
the dad in the sky who will make it all work out later.
Yeah.
Someone's mean to you, don't worry, he'll get his whipping later.
Yeah,
you can get your candy. Later.
It is just this. It's just an offshoot of when you growing up with your two parents, and then you become an adult, you don't have your parents anymore. But there is still something atavistic about this need to have this being cared for need, and so I think that is what makes religious beliefs attractive in many ways. Although a lot of believers probably wouldn't think of it in strictly that way, there is something to Isaac Asimov when he identified religion as a thumb to suck and a skirt to hold. It's something. It's the thing that kind of infantilizes. Right. And people find that it's a security blanket, very comforting. But my second thought just kind of flew away.
We were just talking about some of the things we do on the campuses.
Right.
So we have a public lecture and debate series. Mm-hmm. The most exciting thing that we're making available right now is that students who are of our philosophical, our scientific outlook, can go to our website, www.campusfreethought.org.
Okay.
They join the Campus Free Thought Alliance. It's free to join. Uh-huh. They get in the mail educational and promotional resources, so they can kind of offer an alternative voice on their campus. They get copies of the magazines and organizing guides, some brochures, flyers, posters.
So they understand what all the bullet points are and what to discuss and how to...
Yeah, not necessarily that they get talking points, but that they begin an education in an alternative view. And if there's a student out there on a campus and he goes to or she goes to the website and they look around, they say, wow, there are 80 Christian groups on my campus. There's not one free thought, not one secular, not one skeptic group. Well, they fill out the online form. They get a box in the mail with all kinds of, we call it turnkey materials. Turnkey meaning if you want a Campus Free Thought Alliance group on your campus, it's as easy as getting in the car and putting in the key into the ignition, turning, and you got a group up and running. Because, we've been at this 6, 7, 8 years. That you just do step 1, 2, 3. We have a lot of faculty support. So if there's a student on a campus who wants to start a CFA group, they join as a prospective group. We put them in touch with faculty members on their campus, and then there's a voice on their campus contra the religious political extremists.
And then you can actually have this environment of free
unfettered debate.
Free thought and unfettered debate, and it's not just all one meme constantly being promoted and pushed. What's interesting to me, and we're going to go ahead and take our last few callers in the last 10 minutes. We've got some new callers lined up, so just hold. But I've noticed a couple of fascinating things, and that is that we tend to think of it. We always notice among the Christian right that what's fascinating is that America, in terms of just the question of religiosity in America, this is a very one of the most religious nations of all the developed nations, right? We have more churches per capita than any developed nation in the world. It's people here are very, very open, as you ought to be able to be in a free society about your faith. And yet, when you run into these legal challenges like Ten Commandments monuments or prayer in schools or should creationism be taught as well as evolution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you will constantly hear people on the Christian right characterizing themselves as this oppressed minority.
Right. They use that language a lot.
They're all out to get us, and we have to we have to take America back. Yeah. It's like, let me see, you've got like a far right-wing, evangelical Christian president, who got plopped into office by the Supreme Court.
Pat Roberts and others have actually said it's the last oppressed minority in America,
which is paradox, which is crazy.
I've heard atheist leaders say the same thing about atheism. I think neither are really oppressed minorities. There's unfairness. I think there's even unfairness to Christians in some communities. So there are, the ACLU has defended Pat Robertson at times and others.
But I think in the case of atheists, you can point to certain areas of where oppression,
unfairness.
It's bigotry. If you are an a declared atheist in this country, you can't really be elected to public office.
Right.
Not just because it's bad in the press, but I mean, you physically aren't allowed to run by law.
Right.
If you don't have like a belief in a supreme being or higher power.
That's
I consider
definitely
that
something that needs to be changed.
And I think that's a little more than unfair. I think that is actually sort of a society, sociological oppression thing. But you're right. Overall, I mean, it's, oppression is, that's what the African Americans went through.
Right.
So it's different, but there is certainly disparity and an imbalance. Right. And
a Buddhist couldn't be elected either to higher office, nor could a communist or, So minority opinions unpopular minority opinions need to be advanced through public education, but not necessarily through a civil rights movement. Maybe that's another discussion.
Yeah. But I did think recently, though, that there may be, to a certain degree, something to these Christian claims of, we're being picked on. Mm-hmm. Because I think a recent survey was taken in which, different groups of people, people were polled over, what are your opinion of, like, these guys and those guys, lawyers and at the bottom of the rung, like below prostitutes, were evangelical Christians.
Right.
And
they need a PR campaign, don't they?
But it was specifically evangelical Christians, right? It's not your, you
run-of-the-mill Christians.
Your, everyday guy, right? I mean, it's certainly, the people I think answering this poll are thinking of the Falwells of the world when they say this. And also Marvin Olasky, who is a professor here at UT and in with the Bush administration, religious right, coined the term compassionate conservatism, which I love because it seemed to me that was pretty much a concession that compassion is not ordinarily known as a hallmark of conservatism. But he says that at the beginning of every semester in one of these classes, he passes out listing all these different religions and what do the students think, and usually they give the lesser religions like are the less popular ones in America like Islam, but just they don't really know enough to say anything, or they give some misinformation, or they spout some cliche that they've heard. Right. But he says most of them, when it comes to Christian, it's this long list of negatives. It's like, they're arrogant. They want to shove their religion down everyone's throats and what have you. But I gotta say, I think that it is because of, the very real actions of Christian Coalition and men like Robertson and Falwell and, LaHaye and his bunch and everything. And now you have Roy Moore. And, I think that, it shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, these reactions that people are having, I think, are because most people have this idea that, you can believe what you want, but if you try to impose it on me, as opposed to let's have this free atmosphere of, exchanging ideas. If you want to impose it on me, that's wrong.
Religious political extremism is un-American, and Americans look at it and it's somehow distasteful. It's off-putting. Yeah. You're right.
We're going to go ahead and take one more caller. We're sorry, but, we want to give DJ a lot of chance to talk here. He's our out-of-town guest again with Center for Inquiry, and we're very thrilled to have him. So we're going to talk to Don. Hey, you're on the air. Thanks for holding.
Hello, morning.
How are you doing, Don?
I'm doing fine. I need to get your number again. We were supposed to have a discussion, on my telecast. As you know, it has not been on for about 3 weeks.
Okay.
You schedule it?
Right. Well, why don't then we'll talk...
just give me your number and I'll give you a call.
Well, I'm not going to give you my number over the air, sir.
Oh, okay.
So why don't you, one thing you can do is if you have internet access, you can send an email and I will get it to our viewer feedback address, tv@atheist-community.org. Steve will put that up on the screen. And we can talk about it.
Up there.
Okay, there we go. So I had actually forgotten all about that. So I've been busy with many things last few weeks. Okay?
Okay,
so we'll talk.
I got one question.
All right, sir.
Do you consider people who are not atheists or agnostics intellectuals? What is your how do you determine who's an intellectual? Because I've been through the atheist philosophy. I've looked at the agnostic and humanist philosophy.
Okay, well, we're limited for time, so let's try to answer that question. We'll let the DJ start, and we'll go ahead and put you on hold okay, but thanks a lot. Yeah. How do you determine...
I think atheism is more sensible, but I believe in a robust freedom of conscience and that you can be brilliant. You can be really an ardent intellectual and be a believer. Consider people like C.S. Lewis or any Jesuit, leaders of Jesuitical thinking. Let's at least put it that way. Belief doesn't necessarily follow that you're a numbskull if you believe in God.
No.
Although I believe it's more sensible, it's more rational to lack belief in God, just because of the lack of evidence for belief in God. So hopefully that gets to the question.
And I think that you do tend to see when you have belief systems that are not rational in the first place. Now, adopting them does not necessarily make, like you said, make you not intellectual or dumb, but it certainly can lead to. I mean, it certainly can be attractive to dumber people because, and let's face it, when you begin to accept the idea of that it's okay to go ahead and believe in things without evidence,
right.
It doesn't seem to, at that point, kind of all your standards evaporate.
Just consider that some of the most intelligent men in history have used their intelligence to justify or make sense out of the irrationality of Christianity or Judaism or another faith.
And then, of course, but with extremists, of course, what you can have are people who just adopt a belief as a sort of a justification for more or less, the way they were going to be in the first place. But in terms of...
Isn't it convenient that God just so happens to agree with them socially? They don't like gays or they don't like poor black people or something. God somehow agrees with them.
I want to thank God for winning me this Grammy.
Right.
Right. It's like, what would the creator of the universe care about some spoiled pop star winning a Grammy? It's this sort of way of it being self-congratulatory.
Right.
And anyway, Fred is on 3. Hi, Fred. We'll have time for one quick question. Thanks for holding.
Okay, back to question atheism and agnosticism. I think the whole concept of proof is overrated and misunderstood, but I have no problem at all stating that God does not exist simply because there's no evidence that he exists. And if anyone says to me, but you got to allow for the possibility exists, and I say, no, you don't, because there is absolutely no evidence to support that possibility.
Right.
And if you look in the library, at least half the books in the library are fiction, which we, by definition, are not fact. There's no possibility that they're real. So I cannot see how anyone can say you should allow for a possibility of a God in the absence of any possible evidence of that possibility.
Sure. Well, thanks a lot.
I hear what you're saying about that.
Last minute.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just because someone says atheists, they said aliens visited them the night before, doesn't mean you have to believe that. So I hear what you're saying about that, but it's important that we also have an open mind about any claim and not be debunkers and begin with a bias.
It's possible that the planet Neptune is inhabited by flying purple bunny rabbits, but I don't believe it because there's no evidence, so it's not rational to reach that conclusion. On behalf of ACA, and I want to thank DJ Grothe again for coming to Austin, visiting us here. Excellent talk on the show today, and we hope to we'll be in touch with you through the future. And thanks a lot again for coming on.
Well, thanks very much.
And Ashley, thanks again. Fine job as co-host. We are here every Sunday, 4:30. Atheist-community.org is our viewer feedback address. And, of course, don't forget TV at atheist-community.org, your viewer feedback email for us. We'll see you next time. Remember, theists, we don't hate you. We just think you're wrong. Bye-bye.